All right, everybody, we might get started. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for the second session of Heart and Soul with Dr. Timothy Kanold webinar series. Firstly, in the spirit of reconciliation, Hawker Brownlow Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. For those who aren't familiar with Hawker Brownlow, since 1985 we have empowered F to 12 teachers and educational professionals with the tools and skills, such as these webinars, to improve classroom and student achievement. I'm Lauren Mitchell, editor at Hawker Brownlow Education based in Melbourne. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Tim Kanold, who is an award-winning educator, author and consultant. He is former Director of Mathematics and Science and served as Principal at Adlai E. Stevenson High School, District 125, a model professional learning community district in Lincolnshire, Illinois. Dr. Kanold is committed to equity and excellence for students, faculty and school administrators, a substantial part of that being the effective delivery of the PLC process by faculty and administrators. He is a past president of the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics and is a prolific author, as co-author of several best-selling mathematics textbooks over several decades and author of, or co-author of 13 books on K-12 mathematics and school leadership since 2011. Including the 2018 Gold Medal IPI Award-winning and best-selling book, Heart, and the upcoming book, Soul. Heart is available now, and I'll post a link to that in the chat box, and Soul will be published in February, we believe, so you'll be able to grab that one very soon. And with that, I will pass you over to Tim.
All right, thank you so much, Lauren, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really glad that you're on the session with us, and I hope that a lot of what we're going to do today, that you will be able to use this with your friends and your colleagues as you go through the rest of this school season that we're in over the next month, and then into your break between school years. And so I'm really hoping that what we're going to work on today will be of value to you, but I want to encourage you to bring in your other colleagues to work on some of these things with you. That would be really, really great. I also want to mention to you that with Soul, I did find out just yesterday that it's actually available now for pre-order. And we're going to look at some of the chapters right out of Soul this morning, and how that can really be beneficial to helping us get through these times of stress and the emotional labor that we're under. This session today, oh, and by the way, I need to tell you too, it would be great if you had some type of notebook or something with you where you can, you're going to need to write down and actually draw a diagram today. So, so as we go through this session, if you have something you can write on, that would really be helpful. That would be great. What we're going to look at today is something I call living life between the zeros. And this is very personal. I think today is all about you and how you are choosing to walk through your professional life. Whereas next Wednesday, next Wednesday when we get together, the reason I had to say, oh yeah, next Wednesday is because I'm here, and this is my home office in California in the United States, which is on the West Coast. So it's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, my time, even though it's 9 a.m. your time there. But one of the things that this session is definitely about is more about our kind of professional development and growth as teachers. And next week, I'm going to take a look at how do we really thrive in community with one another. So how do we have collective care for one another? And I think looking at the issues of belonging and vulnerability in our workplace culture. So that'll be next week if you want to invite some friends to that. We'll remind you of that at the end of this session. So in this session, I have a title, a chapter in the book, kind of towards the end of the book. I think it's chapter 22. That's called "Living Life Between the Zeros," and that chapter, along with a couple of chapters that follow, is all about how do we create these moments in our kind of teaching professional life, of joy and gratitude, even during times that are incredibly stressful, like this school year has been, certainly, for all of you. From the moment 2020 started, you had about a month, right, February, and probably some of March that felt normal. And then after that, it's just been nothing but change, constant change, and adjusting to the circumstances that the pandemic have brought us. And so one of the things that bubbles up in times like this of stress is really this idea that we kind of live through our common humanity, and how do we bring a certain dignity and decency to the work that we do. And in this session today, I want to take a look at that. So to get us started, I'm going to ask you a question to put in the chat box. All right. So what I'm going to talk, I want to start with a brief story about school number 17 season for me. Now in the United States, we go to school from August to May. We sort of take June and July are our months, well, kind of mid-June to the end of July, or kind of like your mid-December to end of January. So we consider ourselves in between school seasons during our summertime, somewhat like you do as well, except yours, of course, is at a different time of the school year. So in my school season 17, and here I am, this is actually me in school season 17, because my background is in mathematics. So I was a high school math teacher working to break math barriers in our country. And my school season 17, I would have been 39 years old. So I had 17 school years completed, full year. So what I thought it would be fun, before I get us too far down the road here, would be to ask you to put into the chat box what school season number this is for you. You're about to end school season 10. Was this your first year of teaching? You're about to end school season 30. So think back about, when did you start? Did you start in 2010? Did you start in 2005? Did you start in 2016? So what school season number is this for you that is about to end? All right, so just take a minute, throw that in the chat box. It's a pretty innocent question, really. I guess it's a way of you telling us maybe how old you are without telling us directly. Because I don't make the assumption that you started right out of college. You may have started your professional educational career later in life, which many of us do. All right, that's awesome. I can see the answers that are coming in here. Thank you for throwing them up there. Awesome. You guys are great. Yeah, and it does say something about us, right? About our experience as either novice or expert teachers. And that has really nothing to do with how many seasons we've had, whether we're novice or expert. But what I like too is, I have to admit, I'm in season 47. So Ray, I've got to give you some credit there. If you're in season 50, you've got me by a few years. But at the time, thanks, this is good. I appreciate it. But at the time, I'm in school season 17. And our particular school had decided to take a professional development day, a full day out of our school year for professional wellness, for a day for our faculty, for our teachers and administrators and staff, our support staff as well. So anybody in our school building. We decided to take a day of professional wellness, and you could go to all these different things, including like learning how to tell a story, or you could go to a session that was on in which you did some type of physical activity for the entire day, or some type of session on how to be more, balanced in your emotional presence each day. So I'm attending a particular session in which I'm sitting down at a table with the person leading the session. So it's one-on-one with this person, and he shows me my chart, and this is what my chart looked like, almost exactly what it looked like. It was quite interesting. So remember now, I'm 39 at the time, probably 39, almost 40 probably. And my chart's kind of doing this thing where it's going up and increasing a little bit each year. And then all of a sudden it just crashes and goes to zero. And I said to this guy, I said, wait, what is this thing at the end? What's that all about, where, everything seems to be improving and then I'm going to zero? And he said, well, that's your second zero. And I said, my second zero, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, your first zero is when you started out in teaching, your first year of teaching, and your second zero is when your career ends. Your second zero is when you end your profession as a teacher. And he goes, and at that time, he goes, there's going to be nothing left. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, because what I didn't tell you was I was sitting down with an investment manager. He wanted me to give some of my salary every month to his company in sort of a retirement investment, so that as I get older, I'd have some money to spend. And then obviously at some point, I'm dead or whatever, and there'd be no money left. And he goes, and I remember, I got to tell you, driving home, because I think in season 17, you don't think about, oh, someday my seasons are going to end. You don't think about, oh, there'll be a day down the road where my career ends. And for some of us, there's a day down the road that we think our career end and we don't even get to name it. I'm old enough, some of you are old enough, that you probably have colleagues who didn't get to name their second zero. They wanted to teach next year, but for whatever reason, that wasn't in their life plan. And so what happens is, it was the first time I can remember after that day driving home. And I think at the time, my children were like 7 and 9 and 0, or less than 1. And I remember thinking, this gig doesn't last forever. And it was the first time I felt mortal in a way, like kind of like, oh yeah, I need to be paying attention to what I'm doing right now, because it matters. I'm building a bridge as I walk it, right? And so with that awareness, as I started writing this chapter called Life Between the Zeros, my first year of teaching, my last year of teaching, I found a book by this guy named Tom Rath. And one of the things that you're going to experience today are, I'm going to recommend a couple of books to think about reading during your break this summer for you. And what do you that you might want to consider. This one by Tom Rath, it's called Life's Great Question. The book is really about, and the great question is, what are you contributing to the world? There's a certain maturity that comes as our seasons progress, where we no longer ask, what's our job doing for me, but what is my job asking of me, right? And I talked about that last time in October when we were together. And so there's this moment in Life's Great Question where Tom Rath, who's a very gifted writer, this is a very small book. It's not, yeah, here it goes. I've got it on my shelf here. So there's the book. You can see it's kind of a small, pretty thin book, but really filled with wisdom. You can see all my little marks that I've used for things that I put in the soul. But in the book, he established this idea that as we go through our life between the zeros, we have these signature stories, these sort of signature moments that we can remember with great clarity, that have this positive influence on the trajectory of our work and our life. And so I thought it would be good for us to do this activity today. And I'll give you some space and time to do it. I think I get it. We're crashing down to the end of a school year and you're probably pretty tired. So I accept that, what we do here, you might want to just do it in much more detail later. Maybe when you have some space from the school year in January and you've got some time to really sit down and do this, keep this slide. When I get the whole thing up here, feel free to screenshot it. I know some of you will have my presentation too, so you can do it that way as well. But basically, here's what we do. So you draw out this timeline, and you mark the date of your first year of teaching under the first zero on the left there. So I'm going to do it too. So if I draw my timeline under first zero, for me, that was 1973. That feels like a long time ago. Yeah. So anyway, but you mark that date. Then he said, what you do is you mark the date of your predicted last year. So a lot of us are still in the profession. I think depending on how old you are, you may be closer to that second zero or not. But so mark under your second zero. I'm doing it too here. Oh, I don't know. Right now I'm thinking 2025, but that's predicted. I think 5 years ago I was predicting 2020. So my zero has moved a little to the right. 3, mark the date today. So, you know, and you could even just say, hey, it's November of 2020. So I'm going to do that. And obviously you're going to put your mark closer or to your first or second zero, depending on how many years of experience you put up there. For some of you, if you only put up 9, I saw we had some 5s and 9s, you know, you're just going to be farther to the left. And then here's the thing that Rath talked about in the book. He said, look, it's important that you identify and mark some of the signature moments that you've had so far as a professional, as a teacher, as an educator. Mark some signature moments. They're significant to you. Now, it's very important that you read this with me here. He defines a signature moment as significant to you or your contributions to the growth of your school. And in the United States, we call it a school district or your school region, however you might think about it. So it's their signature moments because they were either significant to you or to your contribution to your school or your students. So it could be the day you started in the current job you have. It could be the particular job you have at the moment. You changed to a leadership position, a coach position, or whatever. It could be the day you started collaborating with a particular colleague, or the year that you did that. All of a sudden, things really began to grow. So that signature moment professionally can be a lot of things. And the point is that you identify at least 1 or 2 that just quickly come to your mind. So what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to ask you, you can do this in a lot more detail later, but for this very moment, I just want to ask you to think about, of your school season so far, what's the first thing that comes to mind as a significant moment for you? Something that you sort of remember, a signature moment, something that just you really remember, like, oh, this was awesome. Right? Professionally, I'm talking about. So this isn't like, hey, I got married. You know, that certainly is a signature moment, perhaps, but this is more a professional important moment. Okay, so just whatever comes to the top of your mind. So I'm going to write down a couple of mine, which will get me to shut up, so I can give you the space to do it. Now, I'm not asking you to put this in the chat box because I think this is personal to you. So go ahead, just take a minute to think about. And maybe it's from this year. Maybe you've risen to the occasion this year under the almost unbelievable stress ever, and you're pretty darn proud of what you've done. You have made a significant contribution to your students beyond what you thought you could do. That's fine. Then write that down. You know, whatever it is for you. Okay? All right. So I'll be quiet. I'm going to give us 2 minutes. It's going to feel like forever, but 2 minutes. I'm going to time it. Here we go. All right, thanks everybody. So this will be important. So we kind of look back on why do these memories come up to us so quickly? And we're going to look at some of the conditions that are usually there to help that to happen. And do these signature moments just happen to us? Are they happenstance, or can we actually create them as we live our lives between the zeros? And obviously there's nothing we can do about them now other than learn from them in order to do what? You know, create signature moments in the future. But before I get to that part, I just want to share one of the dates that I put down. So one of them for me is 1980, which is a long time ago. I'm going to explain this just because it serves a point later on. But in 1980, I had finished my master's degree in applied mathematics, and after having taught 6 years, and I had to make a decision. I had this moment where I had to make a decision between working in what we call in the United States a government think tank, or going back and teaching high school mathematics. The government think tank job paid 2.5 times what my high school teaching job was going to pay. And our children were extremely young at the time. And we were just starting our family. In the end, I kind of blindly made the decision to follow what I knew I was, my heart, which was a teacher. Despite the financial hardship that I knew it would create for our family for a while. Both my wife and I were scrambling as educators. So without knowing who the principal was, I ended up taking this high school teaching job because of the advice of a friend. The principal turned out to be, so I'm 28 or 29 at the time. The principal was 33 at the time. And it turns out that he was this pretty incredible human being named Richard DeFore. And those of you that are part of the professional learning community culture and are familiar with our PLC work at Solution Tree as part of Hawker Brownlow as well, you know that Rick DeFore is one of the original architects of the entire PLC process. I eventually followed Rick to Stevenson and became the principal there and superintendent. And Rick and I worked together for the following 34 years. We became extremely close friends inside and outside of the profession. He became both a mentor and a colleague, and eventually we sort of mentored each other. So in this sort of what appeared to be just following my heart, I ended up being in the path of this incredible educator, and that pulled me forward in my own work. So to me, that's a signature moment. It was significant to me in terms of my own professional growth. So I bring this story up because I want to talk about this notion of that we each have defining moments in our lives. And what I mean by that is that we can be in control of naming these meaningful experiences. We don't just have to be victims to it. Now, mine happened to be kind of lucky. I did that moment that I just described. But there's this great book that you can also get this summer if you want. Here it is, Power of Moments. There you go, another book I'm recommending. Now, this one's a little bit longer read, but it's by these two brothers, Chip and Dan Heath. And they write about this idea of the power of moments that we can create as teachers. And partly why I'm bringing this up to you today, it isn't just for you and your own professional growth at creating the moments, because they make this point: defining moments shape our lives, but we don't have to wait for them to happen. We can be the authors of defining moments. In a way, I was the author of that moment in 1980 because I made the decision to follow my heart and not the money, right? But they make the point that we can actually create defining moments as we think about moving forward. And I want that to be a message that comes out of today, because for those of you on this message with me today on this webinar, and for those of you that have colleagues that you could go talk to, your season is about to end. Your school season number 9 or 26 or 47 or 50 or 5 or whatever it is about to end in about a month. And you have a decision to make about what's that ending going to feel like for your students and for you after an incredibly difficult year in many cases. And that's going to be a moment. And the question becomes, how do you define that moment in a way that's going to be worthwhile for you and for them, right? Because we are in this profession because we understand it's emotional labor. It is about defining moments. And so I want to give you an example of how I explain this. And if you could bear with me, if you would allow me to do this, I'm going to, I just need to read, I want to read to you part from the book. I'm going to read to you an excerpt from the book. It won't take too long. I'll keep the shortened version of it. And as I read it, I want you to hear this song. Should be able to hear that okay? Probably too loud. I don't know if you know this song in Australia. This is Bill Withers. He died just a few months ago, but he was one of our beloved singers and authors, composers, and he wrote a song called Lean on Me. And I just want you to hear the first part of this. Sometimes in our life, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Okay, so, and then that's Bill Withers singing Lean on Me. Okay, so you get that, you get the song, or you got it in your head a little bit. So here's what I write. I'm just, you're not getting the whole story, but just part of it. First time I met him was in a school hallway as I was walking to the start of the school year assembly in the gym. He ran by me and said, "I heard you can sing, follow me." And the next thing I know, I'm standing with him in front of 2,000 screaming students, microphone in hand, singing Boom Shakalaka Laka, Boom Shakalaka Laka to the 1969 Sly and the Family Stone hit, Gonna Take You Higher. That was our beginning together. 35 years later, in the suffocating heat of a Tampa Bay, Florida summer, 10 of us got on the local streetcar system after the end of a long workday, heading back to our downtown hotel. There were a few other people on the streetcar too. The date was July 8th, because remember, in the United States, our summertime is in July, and that's when we do our professional development work. The date was July 8th, 2015, and is hash marked on my updated professional timeline discussed in the previous chapter as a defining moment in my life. Not one of those bigger defining moments, but one of those rare and unique, smaller, more subtle, mostly invisible moments that just stick in your memory. There was silence on the streetcar. Few people were talking. We were tired and a bit weary from the day's work, and our dinner together had left us with a vague awareness of our possible future without him. But he was always a man of action, a carpe diem, seize the day kind of guy. He loved to sing. By now, though, his singing voice was weak. Cancer treatments will do that to you. He sat across from me and asked, "What's that Bill Withers song we like to sing? You know, and I said, "You mean Lean on Me?" And he said, "Yeah, that's it. Could you start it?" And I said, "Start it here, now, on the streetcar?" "Yes," he said. "You mean in front of everybody?" "Yes." So I did. Haltingly, almost shy at first, with the help of others from our group that quickly joined in with voices much stronger than mine, we began. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. The next thing you know, all of us were belting out the song. And when I say all of us, I mean every passenger on that streetcar and the driver too. Two full renditions of the song. As the streetcar would stop and pick up more passengers, they just joined in. We got louder and we added harmony. I saw his best friend who was sitting behind him grip his shoulders as they literally leaned into one another, sang the song together, tears streaming down their face. Lean on me when you're not strong. We had seized a defining moment we would not long forget. Somehow he just knew that music would naturally bring people together. The driver told me that streetcar ride was the best moment of his summer. It was mine too. We got off the train at the very last stop. There were all colors and faces of people, strangers mostly, looking at each other, high-fiving, softly reminding us of our humanity. It was a night with him in a memory, a defining moment in some ways I will not soon forget. That night signaled too what would become the beginning of the ending of our incredible journey together as he was suffering from stage 4 lung cancer. The timelines of our personal and professional journey were coming together in that one very singular 11-stop moment. And the person I'm talking about is Rick DeFore, the very person who started this entire PLC process. And actually someone who reviewed my book, who reviewed Soul, sent me that picture. They had been on that streetcar with us that night and was kind enough to send me the picture. The reason I have my cell phone in my hand is because I didn't know the words to the song. And so I had to look them up. But the Heath brothers would say that that was a moment that became an influential life experience because it had these 4 elements. And I'm sharing this with you because I want you to think about how will you finish this current school season, the 2020 school season, in a way that brings these 4 elements to light for your students and for yourself. Because finishing well, a very difficult, if not almost impossible 2020, an exhausting 2020 is going to be, I think, really important as a way to bring together a year that I'm sure none of us are going to forget for a long time. And what the Heath brothers point out in their book is that really defining moments like the one I just described on the streetcar with Rick have these elements, these 4 elements in play, but they're intentional. That's their point. We plan for these elements. Now, I don't think when Rick DeFore said to me, "Hey, Tim, what's that song? Would you start singing it?" any of us planned it, right? Some moments can just be extemporaneous. But I also think with the month left to go, and as the Heath brothers point out, we can also plan for these moments. So first of all, whatever that moment's going to be, however you end, there should be elevation. You break the script of your normal routine and create a first time for your students, a first way to experience. That was the first time I'd ever sang publicly on a streetcar, right? There will be some type of insight, stretch beyond your normal routines and expectations of each other. You ask students to do something that they probably haven't normally done, but they come together and figure out a way to get it done. I was very uncomfortable singing in front of other people, and yet, it stretched me beyond that normal routine. Normally, we would come back and be on whatever transportation was and not even talking to each other because we were so exhausted. Let's sing a song. I don't know what made him say that, but that was intentional, at least for Rick. Pride, recognize and celebrate others as part of this moment. I think it's what I remember most. Most of those memories that we have of the really significant moments in our lives, there's some type of celebration involved. There's some type of way in which we celebrate our humanity. We're high-fiving each other. We're hugging each other. We're celebrating the effort that we made. There's some type of recognition in that. So what will be your celebration plan with your students and your colleagues as this school year ends and you recognize the Herculean effort that it took to get through it? And then there's connection. Connection is where you deepen ties with your students or colleagues and you develop shared meaning in the moment, right? shared meaning in the moment, that there was this kind of, I don't know, hard to explain, connection beyond the norm because of this activity that we had. And so what I want you to think about as you use this session would be, all right, as I'm going to end this school year, what can I do to create some of these elements in some type of defining moment for my students, whether that defining moment is your very last class with them, whether that defining moment is a final week with them, whether it's giving them some type of alternative assignment that's going to bring them together and collaborate in ways that just you don't normally do, and might even be a little uncomfortable for you to figure out how to do it. That's why doing this with someone else might be a good idea. Essentially what I'm asking you to do is to spend the rest of your professional life also looking forward. I think that's important here, that we use our professional timeline that you got started, but you say, okay, so what do I want to do before December 18th? What am I going to do on December 11th or December 9th or whatever day it's going to be for you? And I need to plan for it now so that these elements could be present. I'm going to create a signature moment that my students and I will remember as we wrap up this school year. So I place a hash mark on a future date. And I say, I'm going to, now what do I need to do to get there? Maybe it's next February. You know, maybe you want to place a hash mark at next February and say, how am I going to open the new school season in a way that will cause this incredible excitement and engagement for my students beyond what I normally do? And I'll have time to plan for it. I've got, you know, the next 2 months, 3 months, 2.5 months to plan for it. Okay, that's fine too. And so we intentionally plan for these elements of signature moments to happen. So again, I'd like to get quiet for a minute. We've got some really cool stuff we're going to look at in the second half of our session together this morning, or in the time we have left. But what I'd like to do is just to get quiet for a minute and just ask you to think about what do you need to do to finish this season really well? If you want to work on a future moment for next year, the next school year in 2021, that's fine, but perhaps later. But just for this moment, because it's coming soon, what's going through your head right now? Just take a minute to write down a couple of thoughts where you might be going like, okay, I think this might be a great way to end the school year. I can put some elevation into it. I can put some pride into it and some connection. All right, so I'll get quiet for a minute, let you do that. No need to put it in the chat box, just think about it. I'm gonna write down mine as well. Okay, so I know you might need more time for this, and I respect that, and I encourage you to just do the best you can to think about, all right, how am I going to plan for a signature moment for my students? Maybe it's going to be a group picture, you know, something like that. Whatever, you know, and everybody's going to sign it, you know, whatever that looks like or feels like for you. One of the things I want to just share with you in the time we have left, I want to give you two really specific ideas. So I'm going to talk about this part rather quickly, but we now have quite a bit of neuroscience evidence that it's really important, the emotion that you and I bring to work each day. You might remember, if you were with me back in October when we worked together, that I talked about this idea of negative versus positive emotion, that quadrant one, high positive energy. Well, what happens is we now have quite a bit of evidence that our negative emotions tend to shut down cognition. If we come into work with a negative state of mind, or emotionally in a negative, exhausted place, it tends to shut down cognition and learning by our students. But if we come in with a positive emotional state, it tends to reinforce and strengthen memory and engagement. Kids actually are more likely to hang on to the learning we want them to learn. Now, there's a lot to this, but most of it's buried in what are called what I'm jokingly saying here a little bit, mirror moments, but it's this idea of mirror neurons. And mirror neurons, basically, if we come in emotionally dragging, then the students mirror that back and they begin to get emotionally dragged down. If we come in with positive emotion, then they mirror that back and they tend to exhibit positive emotion. So there's sort of these two positive emotional paths. And when you are coming to work exhibiting a positive emotional response, and modeling empathy, which means awareness of suffering of others, here's what happens. There's clear evidence of this now, that in the frontal cortex of our brain, it leads to mirror empathy by your students. In other words, they mirror your awareness of others in the room, and they are more likely to engage with others and have empathy for the fact that some students might not be learning as quickly as they are, or some students have a different understanding or background than they do, and so on, which leads to a more compassionate classroom culture. Compassion, remember from last time, is our willingness to act to relieve the suffering of others, to want everyone to learn. And that leads to social structures or students' willingness to engage in the learning. And this is as early as preschool and first and second grade. So, and that in turn leads to greater joy and happiness with your students. So remember, happiness is an experiential thing. So those are all really good things. And of course, the opposite of those things are true. If you and I bring in a negative emotions, what happens is it leads to like a lack of compassion and burnout in the class. So there's a lot on the line here, because everything I've just said about creating these positive moments, these positive memories, is about being able to do that because you're in a good place from a positive emotion place. So I think I'm bringing this up because it's so critical that we take care of ourselves so that we can actually be strong enough to plan for those positive moments. In other words, we may not have created a lot of the stress of this year, but we're going to own the problem nonetheless and make the best of it we can, is the positive mindset we bring to it. But I don't think that's easy. When we talked last time, I talked about how joy is this internal condition that's based on the practice of gratitude. And I promised I would give you a couple of ideas in this session about how to address that. And part of that is when you start to do this, I think it begins to create these kind of opening moments of that we remember, that we tend to remember. So here's a suggestion. You've got a month to do it. Ready? I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful you'll do it, but you certainly don't have to. But I guarantee you it will put you into a positive emotional state, or it will bring you joy for sure. So the first thing is choose someone in your professional life to demonstrate gratitude towards. So someone, one of your colleagues, maybe a student, whatever, but someone in your professional life, you're going to say, I'm going to demonstrate gratitude. I'm going to thank them for doing X, Y, and Z during this school season, whatever progress that's been. You write them a letter. Could be a little one-pager, doesn't have to be a lot. Typed or handwritten, that's up to you. Ask for 30 minutes of their time without any specific reason as to why, just to chat. Just tell them you'd like to get together to chat, cup of coffee, whatever, glass of wine. And then sit with them, and when you're ready, ask them for permission to read your letter to them without interruption. And you read your letter, whatever you wrote. And when you're done and the conversation's finished, before you leave, give them a copy of your letter. I know it sounds simple, but I don't think it's quite as easy as the directions on the screen look. But I really want to encourage you to do this and realize that the neuroscience says the very act of doing this, although it is going to benefit the recipient, actually benefits you more in terms of coming to the classroom in a positive emotional state, and then in terms of being capable of delivering on future defining moments that others are going to remember because they were in your space. They were in your orbit. I know. The second thing I want to recommend to you is to keep a journal. This is Jack London. He's one of our famous authors. You can see this is from March 1903. But London said, keep a notebook, travel with it, eat with it, sleep with it. Well, you can see what it says. Slap it into every stray thought that flutters up into your brain. Cheap paper is less perishable than gray matter. You know, I've thought a lot about this. Journaling is such a hard thing to do, but there's some pretty good evidence to think about this as something to consider. And maybe you do it this summer for your summer, as you have time for a break. But I have found that actually, if you are capable of thinking about, okay, could I really make this something I do and not lose it? You know, because usually people try to journal and it goes away. So in the time that I have, I want to suggest to you a way to make it not go away, a way to make it a new habit that will stick. All right. So first of all, here's another good book that I'm recommending to you. Ryan Holiday's book, Stillness is the Key. Here it is. You can see it's a fairly small paperback, or not paperback, but small book, but filled with a lot of great wisdom. And he talks about why you write a journal. And he said, look, they're for the writer. They're not for you to give to anyone else. They're not for anyone else to see. This isn't a blog. It's a personal journal to kind of give you space to let your brain process what it's going through. He says to slow the mind down, to wage peace with oneself. Where am I standing in my own way? What's interesting, I can tell you, is there is quite a bit of brain research as well. I'm not getting into it here, in which there's evidence that if we get quiet and we get really still, it actually causes our brain to process our thinking better and kind of categorize it. So what would you do if you were actually going to journal? Well, Holiday actually provides some really nice suggestions. He says, well, just have a set of prompts that you would actually answer. Number one, what's the smallest step I could take toward a big thing today? What's something I could do today, right, in order to plan for that moment, that memorable moment a month from now before my school year ends, right? Why am I so worked up about this? I think this is a good one when you're in emotional turmoil. You know, you're angry, you're fearful, you're exhausted, you know, you just go, okay, why is this bothering me so much? And you write about it. And in the action of writing about it, it diminishes the emotional angst of it, just so you know. So that's something to think about. How will today's difficulties reveal my character? Yeah. Am I going to have a healthy response to the struggles I'm going through, or an unhealthy response? You know, what will it reveal about my character? Why do I care so much about impressing other people? These come from Holiday, but I'm like, wow, that I think I really do care about what other people think, and why is that? You know, what's going on to better understand that? And what is the harder choice I'm avoiding? That feels tough to me because I think there's a lot of hard choices sometimes that I avoid. And so he said, these are the kinds of prompts. What blessings can I count on right now? These are all prompts that you could journal about. So I'm like, okay, that's good advice. You know, those are some things to really think about, and you've got them, and certainly can look at them and work with them. But this is the part that I'm going to ask you to actually give us a response in the chat box to. But this comes from another book. Not so small, Atomic Habits by James Clear. So I intentionally designed today to give you some other resources because I knew you were coming up to your summer, and maybe however you order your books, you could find one that connects with you. So James Clear writes about atomic habits, how we really, create habits that will stick. And one of the things that struck me in Clear's work is he talked about this idea of the 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule, I'm gonna give you an example of how to make journaling become a habit. Okay, so for Clear, he says the first thing is you have to have a trigger action for whatever you want that new habit to be. So he said, and you should be able to do that trigger in 2 minutes or less. That's why it's called the 2-minute rule. And it's also phase 1 of kind of a 5-phase. So it's not like I go, okay, let me see. All right, I'm gonna pick up this notebook, and here we go. There's my notebook. Actually, this is my journal. I'm gonna pick up this journal and I'm gonna start doing 5 pages a day every day. No, he says, actually, that'd be the worst thing you can do. In fact, what you want to do is phase it in. So the first thing is you say, okay, what will be my trigger that triggers it's time to journal? And so for me, for example, it's make coffee and sit alone for 2 minutes. No journaling at all. And he says, do that for like 2 weeks. All you do is whatever that trigger is going to be for you. For me, was making coffee and sit alone for 2 minutes. I make my coffee, I sit alone, drink my coffee. No journaling. Phase 2, sit alone for 5 minutes and then stop twice a week. So I make my coffee, I sit alone for 5 minutes and I stop. At 5 minutes, I don't try to sit alone for 7 minutes, just 5 minutes and stop. Notice there's still no journaling. In phase 3, self-reflect on one question. Pick one of those questions that I showed you from Ryan Holiday, or anything else you want to journal about. Reflect on one question for 10 minutes and then stop. So he said, write about it for 10 minutes, one question, then stop 3 times a week. And what Clear makes clear is that you must stop at the end of the 10 minutes. Don't keep going. Phase 4, write in a notebook during the silence for 15 minutes, 4 times a week. And then phase 5, get still, get silent, reflect, and write and renew for 20 minutes, 5 days a week. And before you know it, journaling becomes a habit. I don't know if that's in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. We have crazy schedules. So you have to decide, how you work your way through those phases. So that would be one example. And he's got a lot more in the book about how to do this, but it's incremental, it's small steps. So here's my question for you. For those of you that do journal, do you have a trigger that you could share with us in the chat box? Like what's your little thing you do just to get yourself started? For those of you that don't journal, what could be a trigger, that you could do the 2-minute rule? Like for me, it's literally what I showed you here. I make my coffee and I sit alone for 2 minutes and then I start writing. But literally, it's the making of the coffee and smelling it that says it's time to write. Now I do mine really early in the morning, but for you it could be at a different time. But just what's your trigger? Could you share with us? Would you mind if you drew journal now as a routine? Or if you don't, like what would be something that might help you? Maybe it's just getting the book and looking at it. I don't know. All right, so take a minute, share with us a 2-minute rule that you might use to start the process of journaling this summer as a way to demonstrate gratitude for the things that are around you. I'll let you contemplate that for a minute. And if you don't want to share, I understand that too. If you don't want to put it in the chat box, I know some of you are, but if you don't want to, that's okay. All right. So just keep this in mind as you think about it. I'm getting close to our ending time, so I want to end us on time. One thing to think about too this summer is, as you move towards your second zero, is I came across something where they were talking about creating your 6-word professional soul story as an educator. I thought a lot about this. So you have to say it in 6 words or less. So for me, I wrote down perseverance in the face of failure, because I've had a lot of failure over the years, but I've kept trying, and that felt comfortable to me as sort of a, and maybe there's a better one. I'll have to really sit and reflect on it. But I like that idea of trying to figure out, what is my professional story in 6 words or less, that when I get to my second zero, I'd be like, this is how I want to be remembered in 6 words or less. 6 words or less is pretty tough. So I'm going to just leave that small idea with you to think about as well over the summer and share perhaps with others. And then, I just really want to encourage you to think about how everything we talked about today is designed to help us be in a better place so that we can make time for others, because we are in a profession of others, our students, our colleagues, but we can't be in a great place for them if we're not in a great place ourselves. And I recognize that. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to remind you that we are going to have one more session next week, this Thriving in Community session, which I'm calling Creating a School-Wide Culture of Vulnerability, Belonging, and Validation. I think you'll find it with a lot of very specific strategies about how to actually do this throughout your whole school. And when I say you, I mean you as a collective, right? So working with your all of you in the school, working together to truly become a place where everyone feels like they belong, in a year in which I know this has been very hard to capture, especially if we had long periods of remote learning and blended learning and so on going on. And then it'll be also at 9 a.m. So I look forward to being with you next week. And then Lauren, you might want to mention this more than, but we do have Global PD. And one of the things about Global PD that I really like is that you can go in there and we have tons of videos and areas of support and help. Even a lot of things we talked about today are part of Global PD as well. Was there anything else, Lauren, you wanted to say about the Global PD?
Not exactly, but I will drop the link straight into the chat box so everybody can get there right away.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And then also, Lauren, I just want to thank you for joining us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you next week. So hard to believe that's next week already.
It's amazing how time happens so much.
Yeah, it went fast.
There's the link to Global PD. Now we do have a quick question: is what's the best way to pre-order your book? Unfortunately, we don't have it up for pre-order on HBE in Australia yet, unfortunately, but it will be there very, very soon. So just check back. Maybe even by next week, I'll check it out for you, but shouldn't be too long at all.
Lauren, that would be great, because that would be awesome. Because I know we've got a link for it now in the United States, but if we can, I know if you can find that out, then we can give it to them next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll follow that up for you, Robin. Now.
Oh, I did want to mention, I forgot almost, sorry. But for those of you on the call too, we're going to have a little prize next week where we're going to work out some way to do a drawing to get some of you some copies of Soul when it comes out in February. So we'll announce that next week.
And so we might just wrap it up here. We're a little bit over time, and I think we've just had that one question this week. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Tim, for sharing all of your expertise and your time with us this morning / this afternoon where you are. Don't forget, a recorded version of this will be available in 7 to 14 days, and we'll see you again next week. Take care, enjoy your day, stay well, all of those things. See you soon.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, everyone.
See you next week.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.